Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The wind whipped across the Bosphorus, carrying with it the whispers of secrets that no soul would dare speak aloud. Mehid stood at the water's edge, her hands bound, her heart heavy with the weight of a life that had once sparkled with silk and jewels. Behind her, the grand walls of the Sultan's palace rose like a prison, hiding stories of lust, betrayal, and punishment so cruel it could shatter the strongest mind. She had been a favorite once, desired, envied, untouchable, but now every glance from the eunuchs reminded her. In this world, a single mistake could cost more than life itself. Tonight, she would learn that in the shadows of the harem, death was mercy. The morning sun had barely kissed the waters of the Bosphorus when Mehid opened her eyes, though sleep had long abandoned her. The chill of the wind bit at her skin, and the ropes that bound her wrists left raw marks that throbbed with each heartbeat. She looked around, her eyes tracing the familiar skyline of Istanbul, the city she had once called home, and felt an emptiness that no palace or luxury could fill. Once, she had walked these halls draped in silks finer than clouds, adorned with jewels that sparkled like captured stars. Now, she was nothing but a shadow, a mistake punished beyond the cruelty of death. Her mind drifted back to the palace, to the life she had lost in the blink of an eye. The harem had seemed a paradise at first, a place of beauty, indulgence, and power. Young women from across the empire had been brought there, each hoping for favor, each dreaming of the impossible, the love of the Sultan. Mehid had been the brightest among them, her laughter ringing through the corridors, her charm a magnet for attention. She had risen quickly, catching the eye of the Sultan himself, her days filled with silk robes, fragrant baths, and the whispered admiration of attendants. But paradise was an illusion. The walls of the harem hid rules harsher than any prison. Every smile, every glance, every word was watched. The eunuchs, both black and white, moved like ghosts, silent observers with eyes that pierced through lies. They were enforcers, investigators, judges, and sometimes executioners. A whisper of disobedience could ripple through the palace like a dark storm. Mehid remembered how she had once laughed at these rules, thinking herself untouchable. That pride had been her downfall. Her infidelity, or the accusation of it, had shattered her world. She remembered the day the whispers reached the Sultan. Her favorite companion, another young woman, had told tales of a stolen glance, a secret meeting. Whether true or not, it was enough. Eunuchs had appeared at her door before dawn, their eyes unreadable, their hands cold. They had bound her, blindfolded her, and dragged her through the corridors she once walked with pride. Every step echoed with the memory of luxury now lost, every guard's stare a reminder that mercy had abandoned her. Mehid's heart clenched as she thought of the others, women who had vanished in the night, their fates whispered in terror. She realized then that in this world, a misstep was not just dangerous. It was worse than death. It was the promise of humiliation, despair, and the slow crushing of one's soul. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of the sea, and she shivered. Ahead of her, the Bosphorus stretched endlessly, a mirror of freedom she could no longer reach. But even in her fear, a spark of defiance lingered. She would survive. Somehow she would endure, because in a world where mistakes were punished beyond measure, surrender was not an option. The harem was a world unto itself, a kingdom ruled by whispers and invisible chains. From the outside, the palace appeared magnificent, gleaming under the sun with marble terraces and gilded domes. But inside, it was a golden cage, where freedom was a memory and every action carried weight. Mahid remembered the first time she entered those walls, a young girl full of hope, thinking she had stepped into paradise. Her eyes had widened at the scent of jasmine and rosewater, at the delicate tiles that reflected sunlight like liquid gold. The laughter, the music, the silks, it all dazzled her. Yet beneath the beauty lay a relentless order, strict and unforgiving. At the top of the hierarchy sat the Sultan, of course, distant yet omnipresent. His favor was everything, a lifeline, a shield, a key to survival. Below him were the Valide Sultan, his mother, and the chief consorts, women whose power was equal parts cunning and cruelty. They ruled the harem with invisible hands, enforcing rules so strict that even the smallest mistake could ignite fury. Mahid had learned quickly that smiles were measured, words calculated, and desires hidden. To misstep was to invite the watchful eyes of the eunuchs, and once under their scrutiny, even the slightest suspicion could lead to disaster. Eunuchs were everywhere. Some were black, some white, but all carried the weight of the Sultan's law. They were silent observers in the corridors, entering rooms unannounced, their eyes sharp and patient. They listened to whispers, interpreted glances, and reported everything. Their presence was both comforting and terrifying, a reminder that someone always watched. Mahid had once found their eyes intriguing, mysterious, and strangely protective. Now, they were the harbingers of her doom, a constant shadow she could not escape. Life in the harem had a rhythm, measured by duties, lessons, and ceremonies. Young women learned poetry, music, and the art of conversation, but always with caution. Friendships were fragile. Trust was a dangerous luxury. Mahid remembered the nights when she and her closest companions would giggle behind closed doors, sharing secrets and dreams. Those moments were fleeting, precious sparks that were quickly snuffed out by envy or suspicion. Every action was weighed, every choice scrutinized, and every glance could become a weapon in the palace's silent war. Luxury did not mean safety. Mahid had worn gowns of silk and danced in fragrant gardens, but those very moments of splendor carried danger. One misstep, one unguarded smile, and the entire harem could turn against a woman. And for those accused of betrayal, real or imagined, punishment was crueler than death. It was a slow, lingering humiliation that stripped dignity, hope, and sometimes the very will to live. As Mahid thought of those days, she realized how fragile her power had been. What had once seemed like influence and security was merely a thin layer of beauty over a world built on fear. And now, cast down from the heights of favor, she understood that the harem was not paradise. It was a battlefield, a place where women were both pawns and prisoners, where loyalty was temporary, and where the cost of a mistake was measured not in death, but in suffering far worse. The harem thrived on whispers. Secrets moved like shadows, slipping from one corridor to another, twisting truth into rumor, rumor into danger. Mahid had learned this too late. She had trusted a companion, a girl with soft eyes and a quick laugh, someone she had called a friend. They had shared moments in the garden, laughing under the scent of orange blossoms, weaving dreams of the impossible. The Sultan's love, a life beyond rules, a future that seemed like a gift. But trust in the harem was fragile, and friendship even more so. It had begun with small gestures, subtle observations. A glance too long in the Sultan's presence, a laugh that lingered in the wrong ear. Mahid had thought herself careful, watching every step, measuring every word. Yet, in a world where eyes never rested, where every action was examined and recorded, even the smallest mistake could be fatal. And then, one evening, it happened. The companion, whether out of fear, jealousy, or ambition, whispered a story to the wrong ears. A tale of secret meetings, forbidden glances, and imagined betrayals. The eunuchs had arrived before dawn. Mahid remembered the sound of their footsteps, steady and unyielding, echoing through the marble corridors she had once walked with pride. They came with silence in their eyes and chains in their hands, carrying the authority of a sultan who demanded loyalty and obedience. They bound her wrists tightly, the ropes cutting into her skin, and covered her eyes with a blindfold. Panic surged, yet there was no room for resistance. Every step through the palace was a reminder that she was no longer a favorite but a prisoner. She could feel the walls around her closing in, the soft murmur of the other women, the distant laughter that now sounded cruel, the faint scent of perfumes mingled with fear. The harem was alive, watching, judging. Some looked on with pity, others with envy, and a few with quiet satisfaction. Mahid had once been at the center of their attention, admired, desired, untouchable. Now she was their lesson, a living warning of what could happen to those who strayed or were accused of straying. As they brought her to the Sultan's private chambers, Mahid's mind raced. She thought of the fate of the women who had come before her, whispers of punishment far worse than death. The harem's rules were merciless. Infidelity, or even the suspicion of it, carried consequences designed to break the spirit, humiliate, and instill terror. Death might have been a release, but the punishments here were crafted to linger, to etch fear into memory, to warn all who remained. Mahid's heart pounded as she was pushed forward, blindfolded and trembling, into a chamber she had never been summoned to. The walls, draped with silks and decorated with golden motifs, no longer spoke of beauty or luxury. They whispered of judgment, of cruel justice, of the harem's unrelenting power. She realized, with a sinking certainty, that her life would never be the same. The harem, which had once seemed a haven, had become her cage, and the bars were her own mistakes. Mahid's blindfolded world was filled with shadows and whispers. Every sound echoed in her ears, the soft shuffle of feet, the faint rustle of silk, the metallic clink of chains. She had been dragged from her former life of splendor into a chamber that seemed alive with judgment, where walls watched and ceilings whispered. Fear gnawed at her, sharper than the ropes that bit into her wrists. She had heard stories of punishment in the harem, tales whispered in the corridors, too horrifying for most to repeat aloud. Now she would know if they were true. The eunuchs moved around her like silent predators, their presence suffocating. One of them, tall and stern, spoke in a low voice, barely audible but carrying authority that shook her to the core. The Sultan demands obedience. He demands loyalty. He demands the truth. Mahid's heart raced. She had nothing to say. Whether she had truly betrayed the Sultan or not was irrelevant. In the harem, accusation alone was enough. When the blindfold was finally removed, Mahid's eyes burned against the light of the chamber. She saw the Sultan's shadow at the far end, a figure of power, distance, and judgment. But it was the other figures that terrified her more. The eunuchs standing like statues, and the women of the harem, their expressions unreadable, some cold, some curious, all watching. She realized that this spectacle was meant for her shame, to strip her of dignity before everyone she had once considered friends, perhaps even rivals who had only waited for this moment. Her punishment began subtly at first, words of accusation, reminders of what she had lost, recounting every imagined transgression. Each statement was a lash across her soul. The women watched in silence as Mahid's pride, once untouchable, crumbled under the weight of humiliation. Then the physical punishment began, not with death, but with fear and exposure. She was made to kneel on cold marble, hands bound, shoulders straight, while the eunuchs circled her. The air was heavy with incense, but it did nothing to mask the tension, the dread, the undeniable truth. She had become an example. Hours stretched like days. Mahid's mind fought to stay afloat in the terror, but every glance from a eunuch, every whisper from the other women, reminded her that there was no escape. Death might have ended her suffering quickly, but this slow, meticulous breaking of body and spirit was worse. It was a punishment designed not just to punish, but to terrify, to remind every woman in the harem of the consequences of betrayal. By nightfall, Mahid sat trembling, her body aching, her spirit wounded but not completely broken. She understood now the true cruelty of the harem. It was not the chains or the threats, nor the silken walls that trapped her. It was the fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that a single misstep could haunt her forever. She had survived the day, but she knew that surviving meant something far more dangerous than mere life. It meant endurance, vigilance, and the constant weight of dread. And in the harem, dread was more deadly than any blade. The days in the harem blurred together, each one stretching endlessly under the weight of fear and expectation. Mahid moved like a ghost through corridors she had once walked with pride, her every step measured, her eyes constantly scanning. She had learned quickly that survival required more than obedience. It demanded awareness, cunning, and sometimes the careful use of others. Trust was dangerous, but she understood now that alliances, however fragile, could mean the difference between suffering and reprieve. She had noticed the subtle gestures of some women, the way their eyes flicked toward her, the slight inclinations of heads, the whispers just below hearing. Some offered sympathy, a soft word in passing, a look that promised secrecy. Others were different. Their glances carried envy, the hunger for favor, the readiness to betray. Mahid realized that the harem was like a battlefield where the weapons were words, gestures, and secrets. One wrong choice could tip the balance against her, and the eunuchs were always there, waiting for a slip, a glance, a thought even, that could be twisted into accusation. Late one evening, Mahid found herself in the shadowed corridors near the Sultan's chambers, waiting for a rare moment of solitude. There, she met Layla, an older woman who had once been a favored consort but now moved cautiously, eyes sharp and calculating. "Do not despair," Layla whispered, her voice like silk over steel. "The harem is cruel, yes, but cruelty can be turned. Learn, observe, adapt." Mahid's heart lifted slightly. Here was someone who understood the rules and had survived them. The lesson was clear. Endurance alone was not enough. She needed knowledge and strategy. From that night on, Mahid watched more carefully, listened more intently, and spoke less than ever before. She learned to read expressions, the subtle changes in voice, the quiet movements of hands. Every action, every word became a calculated choice. She discovered which women were loyal to the Sultan, which were loyal to ambition, and which were loyal only to fear. These lessons were dangerous but necessary. In a place where one misstep could lead to disgrace, punishment, or worse, understanding the dynamics of the harem became a matter of life itself. Yet even as she adapted, Mahid's spirit endured small rebellions, moments where she allowed herself fleeting thoughts of freedom, dreams of escaping the golden cage. The Bosphorus, visible through the palace windows, became a symbol of a world beyond chains, a world where the sun touched skin freely, where choices were one's own, and where fear did not linger like a shadow in every corner. She clung to these dreams quietly, like a secret flame that no eunuch, no rival, could extinguish. In these quiet moments, Mahid realized that survival was not just about enduring punishment. It was about reclaiming power in small ways. Every observed conversation, every discreet alliance, every hidden piece of knowledge became a shield. The harem had stripped her of her former life, her pride, even her freedom, but it had not yet taken her mind. And in a place where fear ruled, the mind, sharp and aware, could become the greatest weapon of all. The harem had changed Mahid. No longer the bright-eyed favorite who had once danced through gardens and bathed in sunlight, she had become a shadow of vigilance, a master of observation, a survivor of cruelty. Each day brought new challenges, new reminders of the precariousness of life behind the gilded walls. But now, after weeks of fear, shame, and careful maneuvering, she began to understand that survival demanded more than caution. It demanded courage, patience, and the willingness to embrace the darkness around her without losing herself entirely. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the Bosphorus, painting the water in molten gold, Mahid was summoned to the Sultan's private chambers. Her heart raced, not with hope, not with fear, but with the cold resolve she had learned to cultivate. The eunuchs escorted her silently, their faces unreadable, their eyes sharp. Mahid's mind replayed every whispered warning, every secret she had gathered, every alliance she had carefully nurtured. She understood now that this encounter could determine her future, perhaps even her life. The chamber was quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. The Sultan's figure loomed, a symbol of authority and judgment. Mahid's eyes, steady and alert, met his for the first time in weeks. She saw not just power but expectation, the demand that she prove her loyalty, her obedience, her worth. And though she was still bound by rules and fear, Mahid felt something stir within her. A quiet strength, the knowledge that she had endured, learned, and adapted when many others had faltered. The Sultan's voice was measured, almost calm, as he spoke of betrayal, loyalty, and the consequences of choice. He reminded her of the harem's rules, of the eyes that watched and the chains that bound. But Mahid, steady and composed, did not falter. She answered with careful words, revealing nothing she did not intend, acknowledging mistakes without admitting to crimes she had not committed. Every word was a balance, every gesture calculated to survive without surrendering entirely. Hours passed in this tense negotiation of power, until finally the Sultan signaled the eunuchs to release her. Relief and exhaustion flooded Mahid, but she knew it was a temporary reprieve. In the harem, reprieve was not mercy. It was a chance to live another day, to continue navigating the shadows. She stepped back into the corridors, her mind alive with plans, her senses sharpened by weeks of danger and observation. Every glance, every whisper, every alliance she had formed became her shield in the uncertain world that lay ahead. Mahid stood by the windows overlooking the Bosphorus once more, the water glittering like fire under the twilight. The golden cage of the harem had taught her the cost of mistakes, the weight of fear, and the power of patience. She was no longer the naive favorite she had been. She was a survivor, tempered by cruelty, strengthened by vigilance, and forever changed by the knowledge that in a world where punishment was worse than death, the mind and spirit were the greatest weapons. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the whispers of the city beyond. For the first time in weeks, Mahid allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She had survived, and in the shadows of the harem, survival was more powerful than life itself.